It was written for everybody from concept through to raising about £10 million. So it's for founders, it's for early stage businesses, it's for directors, it's for everybody in that sort of whole range, because it tries to tackle all of the areas that all of them will come up against, the very typical ones, the ones that I'm constantly having conversations with businesses and people in that sphere about. Absolutely. Whenever there are times that are uncertain, and let's face it, the last couple of years have been fairly uncertain with lockdown and everything associated with that, but it can, of course, be very tough on some businesses, but nevertheless, it makes gaps appear in the market, and startups are great at finding gaps and exploiting them. So yes, some businesses have had to batten down the hatches and adapt and pivot, but in general, it's a very, very good time to be looking for those opportunities and exploiting them. Best to allow a good 6 months to raise finance. You might manage to do it more quickly, especially if you happen to find an angel that really gets what it is you're trying to do, but generally 6 months is a fair bet. It might take longer. So therefore you need a runway, ideally of about 12 months. And when you raise finance, at the end of that fundraising, you want to have a runway of 12 to 18 months, because given that it takes about 6 months to raise that finance in the first place, you don't want to have to constantly be going around that loop of raising finance, because it takes your eye off the ball of actually running the business. So you don't want it to be a never-ending process. And the business, yes, that spoke to 176 or so VCs, I guess the key point to remember is they were successful in the end. And as long as you've got the business fundamentals right, you can be successful. But you absolutely need the right business, and you need to be telling your story and telling your story in the right way to make somebody interested in the first place, to then be able to enter into those negotiations. Bootstrappers are the founders themselves, and very often they have unrealistic expectations of what their business is like. So we need to get that out there first of all. But then it's also fairly typical that VCs will value your business at the lowest, because they tend to come at it from a different angle, and they're looking at it from the reverse way round. They're looking at exiting on a multiple of at least 10 times, and therefore they work backwards. So I would say crowdfunding is the one where you'll probably get the best valuation, but you need to be careful not to overvalue your business, because what you absolutely do not want is to have to come back a second time round at a lower or even the same valuation. You want to be able to demonstrate that the valuation of your business has grown. So therefore it's much better to be realistic and have a sensible valuation in the first place. And then angels are probably somewhere around a crowdfunding or possibly a little bit lower than crowdfunding. But that's the sort of the general range. But also in crowdfunding you often need angels in that same round anyway. So they're fairly closely aligned. It obviously depends on, first of all, you have to value the business. And as I've said, too many founders get overexcited on what the valuation of their business is. And that will either mean you're not successful in your raising in the first place, or it means that when you go out to have discussions, you end up getting knocked back and back. So the actual valuation isn't what you thought it was going to be. But then, we've already mentioned you don't want to be coming back at a lower valuation. And it also depends on what equity you have in the first place. So whether you're a sole founder sitting on 100%, or whether for a number of reasons there are already a number of shareholders in that, But typically, each fundraising round would look maybe at selling perhaps 15% of the equity. So that means that you as the founder are being diluted by 15%. And one of the reasons for that is because you don't want to be diluted too much. You need to be raising enough, but it also means you can typically come back again for another round and still not be diluted too much. But somewhere between 10 and 20% is a fairly typical amount that is of the business that is sold for a fundraising round. Well, again, I've come across so many fantastic founders that are exceptional at what they do. But no matter how good somebody is, nobody's good at everything. So they might be the best full-stack developer in the world or whatever it happens to be, but they don't necessarily, obviously, understand all the other aspects of running a business. So just as you would get in a lawyer for contracts or an accountant to do financials, it also makes sense to get the right people around you. So that might be co-founders, but I would strongly suggest getting in an advisory board at an early stage, especially if you're looking to raise finance, because typically you can bring in a lot of outside expertise and for that knowledge to fill in the gaps that you don't already have. So that strengthens your team. It also makes the potential investor feel much more comfortable because there is somebody else controlling, having an interest in the business and making sure that the founders are actually doing what they're meant to be doing. So it greatly reduces the risk of failure and therefore, of course, enhances the business and their interest in investing in the business. You have to have the right pitch deck. The pitch deck is the door opener. If you think of it as it needs to be a really good, interesting introduction to the business. It's the thing that makes them want to know more. So if you think about it as a great trailer for an upcoming blockbuster movie, that's the thing that you've got to be thinking of. Because if you don't capture their imagination with that pitch deck, then you're just never going to get the opportunity to sell them the business. And who knows, they might actually love the business, but if you don't get them past that pitch deck stage, that doesn't work. So typically a pitch deck is between 12 to 18, maybe 12 to 20 slides, and you need to work through what's the problem, what's the solution, what's different about you and your business, what's the team, how much are you raising, what's the money to be spent on, and list out the team and the advisory board. So it's all those sort of things, but it needs to be told in a catchy way. And whether that's a catchy way as a deck or whether it's a catchy way when you present it, as I say, it is all about telling that story in a catchy way and making people really want to come back to you and say, tell me more, this is interesting.